So you're saying that all along, women and men have had the same opportunities, always?
No, I'm basically saying that all along, hardly anyone had any opportunities.
Jordan Peterson is at it again. This time, he goes head-to-head with a politician on issues about gender equality in Europe. It seems like these politicians never learn, and Jordan Peterson is always ready to teach them a lesson or two. Jordan Peterson did not hold back.
Isn't the real problem that quite a lot of men, and also young men, are struggling to deal with the fact that women now are more in control of their lives than earlier?
I don't think that's the problem. I think the problem is that the idea that the West is a patriarchal tyranny is rapidly translated into the idea that young men who strive forward are to be regarded with suspicion because they're doing nothing but manifesting the same sort of tyrannical power that has kept women oppressed for the last 2,000 years. And I think that entire narrative is appalling, right to the core. So, and I don't see that it's helpful to anyone, because making young men weak or failing to encourage them to be strong, that's a better way of putting it, certainly does the young men no good, and it doesn't do the young women any good at all if they want to find a partner.
So you're saying that all along, women and men have had the same opportunities, always?
No, I'm basically saying that all along, hardly anyone had any opportunities. I mean, if you look at the history of the world, things really started to shift in about 1895, but before 1895, the typical person in the West lived on less than $1 a day in today's money, which is about 2/3 the UN cutoff for abject poverty by today's standards. And so what happened through most of the history of the world is that men and women struggled mightily together, sometimes at each other's throats, but mostly cooperatively, to keep the wolf from the door and the tyrant at bay. Life was very, 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 very difficult. And the fact that we survived it all meant that fundamentally we cooperated, despite the fact that we're rife with stupidity, ignorance, and malevolence.
But what's so terrifying with gender equality?
Nothing.
So curious.
Except when people gerrymander the data. It's like, what do you mean by equality? Do you want women to have their free choice or not? If you do, they're not going to pick occupations that are the same as the occupations men pick.
But we have structures today that women need to struggle. They need to take a step to have the possibility to become like a prime minister. As we talked before, we don't have had any prime minister in Sweden that have been a woman, for instance. We have a lower rate of female entrepreneurs. Men had a higher income than women in Sweden, even if they work with the same tasks. And we need to work with.
That's one that I would
We need to work
dispute.
with gender equality, I think, even in the lower class in schools, to learn kids how to play with dolls, or how to boys how. We need to. I think we need to learn boys to be more sensitive, but also young girls to become more self-confident. And I think that's very important to.
Well,
build
the problem with
safety.
that is the data indicate that the consequence of the policies that you're promoting have maximized the differences between men and women. So that isn't what it's doing. Now, that isn't to say that the movement towards egalitarianism is necessarily a bad thing, but a tremendous amount of that's been driven not by social policy, but by technology. I mean, you know, the narrative that we're fed now is that up until 1960, when the enlightened feminists developed their egalitarian doctrines, men had kept women down, and they finally rose. And the truth of the matter is that from about 1895 onward, there was a series of technological revolutions that were extraordinarily powerful in their impact, that allowed women to step forward free of many of the burdens that had kept them back in the past. Birth control being one of them, but only one. Sanitary facilities of all sorts, plumbing had a huge role to play, tampons had a huge role to play, as did sanitary napkins. All of these technologies developed that enabled women to move forward with less biological impediments.
So what would you say is the best period in history to be both a man and a woman?
Oh, clearly now. There's absolutely no doubt about that.
Even-
Anyone who
even
would like
though
to
you
go
worry
back.
for the chaos. You worry about the chaos.
Well, you know, it's nice if we could make things better than they are. And I would say that just as all around the world, we're raising living standards at a rate that is absolutely unparalleled in human history, we're also in danger of destabilizing our culture in the West. And I don't think that's a good idea.
Ord and Peterson's arguments against gender equality based on the concept of equality of outcome and in favor of equality of opportunity present a nuanced critique of contemporary gender discourse. His perspective challenges the prevailing narrative that views history primarily through the lens of oppression, especially regarding gender relations. Peterson asserts that such a binary simplification neglects the complexities of historical context, the roles and relations between genders, and the significant impact of technological advancements, such as birth control, on societal structures and individual autonomy. Peterson advocates for equality of opportunity, a principle suggesting that all individuals should have the same starting point from which to pursue their goals. In contrast, equality of outcome seeks to ensure that all individuals achieve the same results, which often requires interventionist approaches to redistribute resources and opportunities. Peterson argues that aiming for equality of outcome can lead to excessive interference in personal liberties and the natural variations in individual interests, abilities, and life choices. This stance is supported by studies indicating that even in the most egalitarian societies, such as those in Scandinavia, significant gender differences in occupational choices and interests persist, suggesting that factors beyond social construction contribute to these differences.